Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red. Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm your host, Greg Oram. Sadly, no Richard with us on this one, but along with me is the stat man, Dan Scape. Now, it was just a week ago that we presented a special episode focused on the fullback department at Nottingham Forest, where we took a look at all the key individuals and their individual qualities. We discussed the need for depth, and we said that if we were to pick up any injuries, that the cover needed to be strong enough to carry us through on all fronts. Sure enough, 6 days later, that day has come. The news broke today that Ola Aina has been ruled out for 3 months with a hamstring injury, picked up playing for Nigeria just a few days ago. And Forest now find themselves with a bit of a headache for the immediate fixture against Arsenal and, of course, for the Europa League squad. Now, we're going to get into all of that in good time. But first, we have a special guest joining us for the first part of the show. Harry Scarfe is a Spurs fan with his own budding YouTube channel and podcast, and he has come onto Talking Reds to give us his view and insight into Forest's new manager, Ange Postecoglu.
Williams outside him. Here is Nico Williams. Hits the byline. Low ball pulled across. Back post.
Oh, yes!
Aina! And Forest are in front. 37 minutes. It's Aina arriving late into the penalty. Bulldozed his way through challenge. The shot into the top corner from the edge of the penalty area, left-footed Ola Aina.
Yeah, excited. Obviously, not really sure when the next opportunity will sort of arise, and yeah, it happened, and yeah, really excited. I mean, it's obviously great to be back in the Premier League.
Big Ange is back in the Premier League, and the person we've got with us to give us a little bit more insight into Ange is Harry. Harry, how you doing, buddy? Great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Really looking forward to getting into it, talking all things Ange Postecoglu, your new manager.
Thank you very much. Dan Scape, quickly, how you doing tonight, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. I feel like I jinxed the Ola Aina thing, didn't I, when I talked about our Europa League squad? So it's my fault. I'll take the full blame on that one.
I think I do remember last week when we were doing the episode, maybe I imagined it, but I think you talked about us getting an injury, and I think maybe I even said, don't say it out loud. It was either last week's episode or one before. I said, don't say it out loud, don't say it out loud. So, yeah, I think I am blaming you, Dan. You definitely did jinx it.
Happens a lot,
We're going to get into the Ola Aina chat after the break. But first, Harry, okay, you're here. Ange seems to be loved wherever he has been. But he did preside over the worst Premier League campaign in Spurs' history last year, whilst also completing Mission Impossible to bring you silverware in the form of the Europa League and get you into the Champions League. So, you know, he did it in one respect, but some might say failed massively in the other. Tell us your overriding thoughts and opinion on Ange Postecoglu.
Mine is personally crystal clear. I don't do any like in-betweens with a lot of things, but in particular when it comes to Postecoglu, for me, I'm absolutely thankful for his time at Tottenham. And I personally, if it's down to me, wouldn't have ended it. Whether it be the right decision or not, we don't know at this moment in time. But I look back on it with nothing but like kind of positive feelings, with joy, if that makes sense. Because in my opinion, that was Tottenham's, well, I think it actually is Tottenham's best season in 41 years, because that's our first European trophy in 41 years. And only the third manager in the club's history, in Tottenham Hotspur's history, to win European silverware. So that's a massive thing. And we already before that had a 17-year trophy drought. Give you an example, right? I'm 16, nearly 17. I've never seen a trophy in my lifetime before Ange delivered that trophy. So we were bad in the league season. There's no excusing that. But I do think people are a little bit blinded and look at it with their eyes closed. Ange also got us I don't know if you guys know this either, but we actually got to the semi-final of the Carabao Cup as well. And we actually beat Liverpool in that first leg. So this narrative that's being pushed that we couldn't compete on more than one front simply isn't true, because I'd argue we competed as well in the Carabao Cup. Of course, the league wasn't good, but look at the squad Postecoglu was given. Look at the injuries that faced him, and unfortunately, a lot of that is down to the system. But we knew going into the season as fans, a couple of injuries, and we'd fall apart because the board simply did not do enough to back Postecoglu. So I'll be forever thankful. I'm sad that it ended. I don't know why the club ended it. Totally wrong. I think when you in the dressing room, you win a trophy, you should be building on that momentum going again. Got that taste of winning. Having said that, very happy with Thomas Frank. But on Ange, I just think I look back and go, thank you for everything he's done. And you're right, he leaves everywhere in a better place than where he walked into. And that's a stark contrast to the so-called winners in your likes of Mourinho or Conte, some to name the least, that you could have had, for example, in Mourinho. So I think you've definitely got the appointment right, in my opinion. And I think it definitely turned Forest into a very good and competitive club. And I don't know why others, including some within the Spurs fan base, push that narrative otherwise.
I'll ask you another question, and I'll let Danscape come in. Just on those injuries then. I mean, they were obviously a huge issue for Spurs. Everyone talked about it. Ange talked about it. I mean, just how much blame can you place, though, on the injuries for that place of 17th in the Premier League? I think it was 22 league defeats, wasn't it? I mean, that's not great. I mean, fighting on all fronts is fine, but how much blame can you really apportion to those injuries for that?
Quite a lot, I think, because when you're playing Archie Gray and Ben Davis at centre back, I think that's when you're in I'd call a dire state. You know, if I'm totally honest with you, Ben Davis is what I call past his sell by date without being horrible about it. And Archie Gray is a fantastic young footballer, a lot at his feet, not a centre back. That's not where he wants to play. It's not where he should be playing. So we were proper down to the bare bones. And there's one point where we had 7 defensive players out, and that for Tottenham is just catastrophic because we only had 8, for example. So I remember there's one game in particular where it was just Pedro Porro out of the whole back line, including the goalkeeper, that was a natural defender. It's not just a case of, okay, your first choice. Everyone else there was in the wrong position. That's the thing. Jed Spence out of position. Ben Davies out of position. Gray out of position. It was Kinski in goal. And we went through so many different goalkeepers, Austin, Forster. But in terms of the injuries, pinpointing who, it's a guesswork, really. We can all sit here and go, oh, it's on Ange, it's not on Ange, because we don't know what goes on inside those training sessions. But it makes sense putting 2 and 2 together to go, Ange plays gun-ho football, rightly or wrongly, and plays with a very high line. And a lot of his injuries were hamstring injuries, which I believe Aina's got. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know it's to do with international duty, but still it's a hamstring injury, unfortunately. And we look at the likes of Van der Ven and Romero, and I don't want to worry you, but I think, to get this right, Van der Ven 3 times, I think Romero 4 times, I think 3 might have been hamstring that he got injured in Ange's time. It's an awful lot. And we're not talking about you're out a couple of weeks here. As you know, hamstring is quite a few weeks indeed. It's quite a couple of months at least on the sidelines. So that is a worry. But at the same time, I think you've got an owner, as much as I'm going to be totally honest with you here, that he frustrates me as he would any other fan of another club, because he has the best interest of Forest. He's a manager to back Postecoglu. Our owners didn't do that. Our chairman didn't do that. If you give Postecoglu, let's say, 2 really good teams that could compete in the league in Europe, you do even more in January. I think you had a good window, by the way. Then that's okay. But Postecoglu isn't very good with what I call these thin squads and these clubs that talk the big talk of a top 6 club, but don't back it up on the pitch or back it up in the transfer window. And unfortunately, that was Tottenham. But it's hard to know how much of it is down to Ange, that kind of blame.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's new. It's a new territory for us, having quite such a deep, strong squad. So it'll be interesting to see, if that does work out for Ange. It sounds like obviously you're on the side that you would have probably kept him on for another season. But do you think the league position? Do you think if it was just a case where maybe you'd finished sort of 10th or 12th, that would have swayed him? Was it a case that if he could have just done a little bit more and adapted a bit more in the league, that would have just been enough to keep him in the job?
Probably, to be honest with you. But what just frustrates me is that Tottenham are in this position where you don't win trophies. It's as simple as that. Haven't for a long time. And when you do, you get rid of your manager. That's the thing. You get rid of Pochettino when you get to the Champions League final. You get rid of Mourinho when you get to the League Cup final. And then you get rid of Postecoglu for winning the trophy. So
it's a bit bizarre, isn't it, Harry, to be fair?
Yeah.
I mean, from the outside looking in, when Jose Mourinho was sacked days before the final, it was just absolute farcical. I mean, Poch possibly at that time, from the outside looking in again, maybe took you to a place where maybe he wasn't going to be able to kind of improve upon. I don't know, maybe not. But I mean, when Ange got sacked, I saw it coming. He said himself in the interview press conference yesterday, he said he knew it was coming. And so You know, it was no surprise. But when you get somebody wins you the Europa League, and at the same time that gets you qualified to the Champions League football, it's almost like, how much did he potentially say, look, I'm going to put all my eggs in the Europa basket? We can sack the Premier League off, whether you finish 10th, 12th, or 17th. As long as you retain your status, the league is done. Let's focus on getting into the Champions League via the Europa. I mean,
You're right.
he did that, and he got sacked.
But do you know what's worrying, and what the sad thing is? I can pretty much guarantee you, if we'd finished, let's say, 6th, let's say 7th, more realistically, in the league, but we won nothing, then he'd still be in the job. And that's the problem that I have. And that's why you see these long trophy droughts at clubs like Tottenham, where I look at it, for me, I'd much rather win the Europa League and finish 17th than even finish 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever it may be. Of course, you want us to be up there, but it's not all about trophies. Don't get me wrong. But there's Tottenham we're seen as this banter club by other clubs such as Arsenal for not winning a trophy, and rightly so. So to end that, I think was very important. And there's nothing wrong with necessarily parting ways with the manager because you look at the league form. And I don't say it's crystal clear, although I would have kept hold of him. I get why the club done that, but it's the way they went about it. Like, they let him go on holiday, not knowing what his future was, then tried to contact him apparently on holiday, tried to let him know the decision, and then they weren't sure, and it was just a complete mess, really. And at a time where we were all celebrating after the parade and trying to enjoy ourselves and not knowing whether our manager's here or not, it's not fair on the fans, it's not fair on the players. And I think that's the problem with Tottenham. You get to somewhere you want to get to as fans, and it gets instantly that joy wiped off. But I think Postecoglu, to bring it back, would do really well at Forest.
Yeah, I think that's just the outside versus inside view, because I can imagine if it was in reverse at Forest, I would be all behind him because, yeah, you've delivered that trophy, that thing that we've been desperate for. But I guess from when I look at Spurs from the outside, I kind of think, it just can't be acceptable to finish 17th, because I know where you're aiming for, and where obviously you're aiming for Champions League, not Europa and all that. So I can kind of see why from the outside, that they felt that they need to move on. But if it was the reverse and I was a Forest fan and we just won a trophy, I would probably be in your position, just saying, let's keep going and try again and kind of back the guy, which I guess is a little bit where we are in our scenario.
We said if we got 17th and won Europa, we'd all be dancing down the streets and having them on our shoulders. Because I think Dan's right. I mean, I live very close to Spurs. I'm in Cheshunt, so I'm just up the road. So I know this area very, very well. And while Spurs haven't won trophies for a while, they have spent a lot of money on their stadium and a lot of the infrastructure's in place, and consecutive kind of Champions League finishes where you kind of almost broke into that top 6, top 4 big set of teams to then kind of finish in the Premier League so low. I think Daniel Levy said that we just can't accept that. So that's why he's out, and that's why he was available. I think what we really want to kind of get a little bit more from you on, though, is this style of play, because we have had Nuno Espirito Santo, who everyone knows about and we've talked about, and all the outlets in the media have spoken about the differences between Nuno and Ange. But we have seen, and maybe you've seen it or not, I don't know, not Harry, but the first 3 games of this season, Nuno has adopted a more possession-based style of football. Whether he wanted to do that as his own natural progression or not is up for debate. But the players being brought in and the way that we played in those first 3 games, it lets me think that they're kind of players and a style that's already kind of starting to happen, that's ready for Ange Postecoglu. Can he only play one way? Will he be stubborn? Can we expect to have a high line and Nikola Milenkovic pulling both hamstrings before the 45th minute?
I'm afraid yes to every question I think you asked. I think Ange does play one way, but he does it well, to be fair to him. But it's that you get to that point in terms of, do you become predictable? But sometimes he changed it. Like, I think we won 1-0 up against United in that Europa League final, and we sat back a little bit. And there was times where I think Everton away, I remember going 1-0 up, and it went 1-1, and no, let's get this right. No, we went 2-1 up. That's right. Sorry. And then we made the change to put back 5 on because we'd already gone 1-0 up and blown that. So then we went 2-1 up and thought, okay, let's go to a back 5, which for the last 3-4 minutes brought Dragusin on, and it actually worked against Ange because we conceded. So, and after that, we never saw a change of formation or anything like that. So we'll be playing very much one way, but the difference in the way, even if he has changed between Nuno and Postecoglu, is you can't get greater than that. It's as simple as that. I mean, I just looked at some of your preseason games, I think a couple of weeks ago. How many did you draw 0-0? That for me tells you everything about Nuno.
4
It was
0
one goal. It was one goal all pre-season, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Exactly.
very very different.
Yeah, they say they're totally different, but Postecoglu will play his way. It's high line, there's no doubt about it. And against Arsenal, I think you'll see it straight on Saturday. Of course, it
I think
takes a
so.
while for managers'
Straight
ideas.
in.
Straight in. I honestly think you'll see it from set pieces. You'll be thinking, "Where's the defense?" Or you'll be out the ball and think, "Hang on a minute, what's going on here?" It feels so weird at the start, and sometimes you get that situation where it works perfectly. A team just can't cope with it. Amount of times we beat Man City, Man United, like aggregate against Manchester teams last year was like insane, absolutely bonkers. We blew them both away. Both weren't good in their own aspects. That's important to note as well. But also, you can be beaten. I remember Pochettino, Chelsea coming here, and they just figured that eventually it took them forever when we had, to be fair, 9 men. They worked out the high line. So with 9 men, that's the thing. You could get half the team sent off and you'd still be playing with the high line. Everyone could be injured. That's the problem. There's no like safety net, as I call it. There's no like option 2, plan 2. I'm not saying the Postecoglu won't change certain things, like certain players in different positions, but that's the only concern is, when you come up against a really big opponent or a manager that thinks a lot about the opposition. So everyone knows the way that Ange plays, but it's whether you can stop him or not is another thing. And I promise you, your game tomorrow lunchtime, I think will be really, really interesting. And I'm not saying you're going to dominate Arsenal or anything like that, but you'll certainly give it a go. I think you'll find you create more chances, and at the very least, you'll be playing a lot further up the pitch, about 30, 40 yards up the pitch.
Yeah, I think it is without doubt going to be more exciting than what we've seen. I don't think anyone doubts that side of it. It is like you say, it's the can we just adapt enough to put results on the board? Because I think we're perhaps not in a position where you were that you could have a season like last season. Like we need those league positions to get the money and the revenue and everything in almost with where we are. So I think we can't afford to just focus on one competition. So hopefully the injury curse doesn't continue. I will touch wood on that one, and we get through that. But I don't know, what's your gut feel in terms of how he will actually do at Forest? Obviously based on what you've seen from his style of play and what you know from the results and the kind of change in form, and obviously a bit of what you know about Forest and the players we've now got. Do you think it actually is going to work out, like kind of gut feel at this point in time?
I think he'll do a good job. I do. I really do. I think that it's important to recognise the work that Nuno done. I'm sure that you have, and many other Forest fans. I just look back and think what he done was incredible, because you were going down before he come in. I think I personally disagree. It's a whole separate thing about the decision to get rid of him, even if they had fallen out. But I think that Ange will do really well at Forest. I think it's a perfect opportunity for him to get straight back into management. He's still, you can tell deep down, upset that he was sacked or wasn't happy about it. So that's what I'd want, that fire in the belly to prove people wrong. So to say it now, I think he will hit the ground running. I don't think necessarily you're going to be, good as, top 4, top 6, but I think you'll be in and around that European conversation, both this season and next season, if he's still here. And I do think you'll win a trophy, whether again, it'll be this season, whether it be next season. He just has that knack, that way of convincing players of getting the job done, like Nuno did almost to get you in Europe. Ange has that, but to win a trophy, it's a little bit different. So something will be sacrificed, whether it be players' injuries or a league position, potentially. But I think this is different to his time, even at Celtic or at Tottenham, where that backing just wasn't there to the same extent that it has been and will be under Mariakis. That's what kind of, should excite Forest fans. It excites me even as an outsider, wanting Postecoglu to do well. So no, you'll be really competitive and be really entertaining to watch. But I think you've just got to get to a stage maybe where you accept that there's some games that you will lose. And when you lose, sometimes it might be quite badly. But having said that, under Ange, there's two polar opposites, right? If we lost games, we'd lose by a single goal majority of the time, like 95% of the time. If the other time is like we'd lose 1-0 or we'd lose 5 or 6. It'd be quite badly when the floodgates opened. But I think he'd do really well there, and I will be absolutely rooting for Forest under Postecoglu.
Amazing to hear. I mean, it's interesting because obviously in his first season he came in and managed to get you a top 5 finish, a 5th place finish, in fact, and so he came in and made an immediate impact. And like you said, that was off the back of Conte, I think. So there were some Conte players there, maybe even some Mourinho players still hanging around in the building. So, I think about the likes of Jed Spence, because obviously we had Jed Spence in his absolutely stellar breakout year when we had him in the Championship. And it was at the end of that he went back to Middlesbrough, and it was the club, it was Spurs that bought him. And Conte came out and said, I don't want him really. He's a club player. And he was shipped out on loan to various places. And it was under Postecoglu he got the chance. And Jess Spence is a fantastic footballer. He just got his first England cap. So, if you're working with players that fit his style, then you can see them really excelling. And I'm so excited for the likes of Nico Williams. We've got Delane Backward who's just come into the club as well. James McAtee, Callum Hudson-Odoi, and we've still got Morgan Gibbs-White after all. We nearly lost him in the summer, potentially. And I know that is a bone of contention with Spurs. And we did quite enjoy the banter. And I know that Mr. Marianakis is the pantomime villain across the whole footballing world, but certainly in North London or one half of North London and also in Croydon, he's not liked in the slightest. So it sounds like you are a big Ange fan. When the news broke that Ange Postecoglu was the Forest manager, I mean, did you feel like a bit gutted? Were you like a bit, you know what? This doesn't feel right. Because I even saw Henry Winter as well. And I disagree. I love Henry Winter, but I disagree. He tweeted out that Thomas Frank is clearly an upgrade on Ange Postecoglu, which absolutely baffled me. I've got to be honest with you. To say that Thomas Frank is clearly an upgrade, I think is wholly wrong. Because Ange has won trophies wherever he's won. I don't think Thomas Frank has ever won anything. I'm not saying Thomas Frank is not a good manager. I think he's got something up his sleeve. But Ange seems to have this aura. I mean, I was on the fence. I wasn't sure. I mean, asked me 6 weeks ago, I was no. Asked me 2 weeks ago, I was no. Now I'm like, I've seen that press conference. It took 5 minutes. I'm in love. I'm like, oh my God, this geezer's great. So were you gutted when he came to Forest?
Yeah, it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't now, and it didn't then. Part of me looked at it and went, oh, good for him. Get straight back into management, an opportunity in the Premier League to send a statement to Tottenham. But part of me thinks that should be us. And what all you think as as fans, and you'll never know. That's the thing, and either a good or bad thing. I'll let you choose, but I just can't help but think what could have been. I was there at the parade, and Ange's words were, season 3 is always better than season 2. And the general feel, I mean, people were split on Ange, don't get me wrong, but we were so happy at the time, and we were just like, come on then, we've been absolutely awful, but come on, we've got a trophy. And in terms of your Frank and Ange comparison, very, very difficult, because if I'm being honest, I think Frank's a better coach of players. He's better, like, in terms of, not say tactics, but like in-game management, or like maybe getting a best out of in particular player. But anyway, like if something changes in a game, Frank like comes up with this master game plan. Whereas Ange, I personally don't think he puts too much into the game plan. It's, I think, motivational messages, very good training. It's a lot of that. However, Postecoglou is a serial winner. And in my eyes, I'd much rather a serial winner than a good coach. That's the problem. Postecoglu isn't a coach, but he's a winner. And I think Forest, I think you would, and correct me if I'm wrong, take someone that comes in and, let's say, wins you the Europa League or wins you an FA Cup, or gets you competing for these big honours, which I'm sure just excites you hearing that. I think you take that over someone who's a good coach and might win you one game. Like Frank, good coach, wins the game against City. But there's a bad side to that. His game plan, he said going into the Bournemouth game, I'm trying something new. Never tried this game plan before. We looked awful. We played out the park by Bournemouth and lost 1-0. So that's ripped up, So I think he'll do really well, and I almost hope he does. I have no kind of bitter, because some Spurs fans will look at it and go, oh, why has he gone there? Or, I don't want him to do well. I'm not like that. I want Forest to do well. They've got someone who brought happiness and a time that's difficult for the club. So no, I'll be forever grateful for Ange and hope he does well. And I think he will do well, which is quite exciting.
Do you think specifically he can repeat what he did last season in terms of the Europa League? Do you think there's something about his way of going about that competition that'll help us out? Because obviously that's probably top of our list, I think, in terms of what we'd like to achieve this season, given our history in Europe. So yeah, I don't know whether you think there's anything specific about the way he approached that competition and his experience there that will help us.
I do, absolutely. He's a proven winner. I'd be glad to be back in Europa League. If I had to predict sitting here now, and there's absolutely not too much thought with it, it's just, thinking at the top of my head, which I'm often wrong about, I think he'd spend about 3 years at Forest, a little bit longer than he generally does another club. If I had to predict, I think this season you win the Europa League. I think you might be kind of around 7th, 8th, 9th. So nothing, it's good, but nothing hugely spectacular.
Trust me, we'd take that. We'd bite your balls off for that, Harry.
Yeah, exactly.
As I always say.
Like 8th and winning the Europa League. Now, I think next year you'll be a little bit further down in the league, but I think you win the FA Cup and look not as great, but still get the FA Cup done. And in the third season, I don't know quite what happened there. He might go after the first period, but I think he win. The difference is, I think he win 2 trophies at Forest. I think there'd be sometimes you look a bit kind of loss. I think that first season it might go downhill a little bit. But
Now then,
Ange will leave you, and then mark my words and come back to this. Ange will leave you in a good place. You might not be happy where you're in the league, whether it be mid-season or the end of the season. Being Mariakis the owner, I see it more being during the season. Ange tends to go at the end of the season. That's the only thing. But I can see him leaving you in a good place. You might think, oh, come on, we can do better than this. But he'll leave you either with trophies or with a good feeling or it'd be something. And that's what I like. Whereas Mourinho and Conte, okay, they might win something. Neither of them did at Tottenham, not being funny. And they left us in an awful situation with Asian players, with players not happy, and just a horrible feeling around the fan base, putting up with negative football. Postecoglu's football will bring a smile to your face. It's something to go and enjoy watching Forest. And I think you can have the same success you had under Nuno while playing a better brand of football. And the difference is getting the trophy over the line. So I think there's a lot to look forward to for Forest fans. And what probably felt, I don't know, quite strange when Nuno was sacked, I was thinking, what Forest doing? What are they going from here? They could really fall down. And if you got that appointment wrong, then it'll be funny. That could be disastrous. I think if it had been Mourinho or Ten Hag or any of these managers that are rumoured anyway in the conversation, we could be talking about something quite different where Forest slowly slump back into a relegation battle. But because of the appointment, I think you've given yourself a real fighting chance of still having a really good season despite a slightly challenging start.
Now then, young man, I say young man because you are 16 going on 17. And, you know, I know you're a student of the game and you're doing so well with your own podcast and channel. But the great Brian Clough, who certainly became long before your time, you know, he was the last manager to really take the club by the scruff of the neck and hoist it out of being a provincial club from a provincial city. And those European days are something that we dine on because we were then in the wilderness for 23 years down out of the Premier League. So I'm old enough to remember us being in the top flight and old enough to remember the European days and all that kind of stuff. And so for you to come on here and speak so assuredly that you're going to win trophies under Ange, you know, it's like, well, hang on a second. We're not used to this. I mean, it's a long time since this happened. So I'm going to click this up and I'm going to, when we lift the trophy, you'll be coming on this program. And when you're 18, I'll be buying you your first beer because it's what we all want. It's what we absolutely all want. Danscape, anything else you wanted to ask Harry before we wrap things up with him?
I guess, could you pick out one player in our squad that you think will thrive under Ange that maybe hasn't already or that will just go on to another level? Like from what you
great
know
question. That is very, very good question. Someone that he might not necessarily thrive, but someone like Ryan Yates seems perfect kind of for Ange in terms of he didn't have that number 6 at Tottenham. And this is going to be a really bold claim because Ange isn't a defensive manager, but I just think that Ange can play his football and have Ryan Yates sitting in front of the defence and not have to worry about conceding goals. If Tottenham he had that number 6, if he had Paulinho, which Frank has, I just can't help but think where he would have been. I don't know. That's a wild claim, but the obvious ones are Chris Wood, you know, Hudson-Odoi, I think is to state the obvious, but I think he'll be very good. Nico Williams, I think you mentioned Greg yourself as well. I think very
That's
good.
The one, yeah. I think he's definitely an Ange ball.
It's interesting
kind
you
of
mention Chris Wood because a lot of people are thinking that because of his age and his legs that he won't have the pressing capabilities to really play in Ange's system. And Yates is a character. No, I love Yates, but he is a player that divides opinion in the Forest fan base. I know that he is a proper shithouse, and all the other fans of all other clubs hate him because of the job he does. And it's whether or not he gets the game time. So it's interesting from the outside looking into our club that you're saying, well, Ryan Yates could be a player that Ange employs. He won't necessarily play as a 6 so much, I don't think, Ryan, but certainly in that kind of area you're talking about. So I think we mentioned Ryan Yates the other day and thought the Arsenal game was a perfect one for him to come in and be that kind of S-house to get into them. And has Ange got S-house up his sleeve? Is he the kind of manager that gets his team, like, you know, riding up opposition and getting into their faces a bit?
Not really. Very nice.
No?
You won't see complaining at officials. You need to get used to, you know, the arms folded on the touchline. He doesn't move, and that doesn't mean he doesn't care or anything like that. He have his hands in his pocket or arms crossed. It won't be much movement there. And people, Spurs fans in particular, really disagree with my shout about Ryan Yates. But I actually think, a little bit of a bold prediction here, that Ange has learned a few lessons from his time in the Premier League at Tottenham. I think he'd change a little bit. I think there'd be time. I think little things like that, making Ryan Yates in the team, or maybe relying on Chris Wood and have like the likes of Hudson-Odoi running off. I think he learned a couple of lessons. Still think Ange will be an Ange, you know. But I still think deep down he'll be thinking, okay, sometimes I might need to see out a game, even if it will be a final if I get there. I think there's little things like that he will change because, it, you know, all jokes aside, and no disrespect to Scottish football, but it's a lot different there. It's
You
only
can
between
disrespect
Celtic and
it
Rangers.
as much as you like. It's a pub league. We all know that. Come on.
Exactly. So I think he'd do well. But Ange is not, he's about the coach. He's not going to necessarily transform an individual. He'll give people opportunities, young players in particular. So if you have any young players on the cards, like Anderson, I think now absolutely every single week, if he's not already in that team. But he's generally, what he'd do is create a big buzz around the group. He'd bring everyone together. There'd be no, I want to leave. We didn't have that under Ange. Nobody wanted to leave. Nobody kicked off a fuss. And Ange come into the club and we got rid of, no joke, trying to get this right, 17 players I think we got rid of and brought about 9 in within 2 windows. It's a complete change at the club. What Pochettino wanted, that rebuild, and it just really helped. Where young guys that were positive and really excited. He just brought everyone together, and that's the thing. And that was what was really exciting. And there was a problem when Postecoglu went, would we lose all these players? And I think because we've got the appointment right in Frank, that didn't happen. But if we didn't, it could have been a different situation. So I don't think there's going to be a player that's going to go from here to here. I think as a group, the morale, the confidence, and as a team, you'll go from here, but maybe not individuals. But I think that's okay. You get everyone playing, you get everyone involved. People will be playing different positions, out of position, and they definitely give younger players a chance.
Fantastic. One final question from me. Something that I didn't like from Ange was the way that he approached some of the media things he did. And I know that he was always good for a soundbite. The media knew that as well. I'm on his side. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I just want to see him lift his head up and take his hands out of his pockets. I've read comments that that's just who he is and that's what he's always done wherever he goes. So don't read too much into that. But I just want I want to see that nice aura side of him. That nice, he is a good bloke, mate. He is that kind of character. But sometimes it just feels like the world is on his shoulders. And I hope that doesn't happen at Forest. Did that kind of thing bother you as a Spurs fan and other Spurs fans? Was it something that turned you off a little bit as well?
Me personally, yeah, I want someone that's giving feedback. And there was just one time I remember in particular, I'm not going to paint it any other way. It was concerning. I remember Brighton at the Amex. And again, Harry, let's get this right. We were 2-0 up at half time. Brighton scored early in that second half. So they scored and their momentum was with there. They hit the bar, then they hit the post. We could all see what was happening. The equaliser was coming. Then it did come. And then we all knew it was going to happen. And then within 4 minutes, Brighton went 3-2 up. Then they went 4-2 up. And then we made changes. That's my concern. I personally look at that in hindsight, and I did say at the time, it doesn't matter. Ange knows a lot more than me, absolutely. But I think you go 2-1, be making changes. Okay, if you don't manage to do that 2-2, you change things. Even if you take a draw, you could just see that game was slipping. The Brighton fans were getting behind the team. It was a night game. Game was slipping from us. Players looked tired. There were options at the time on the bench. There wasn't as many injuries, but he didn't move. And there was a Sky analysis camera after the game. Just shows you, they don't do it with any other manager. It shows you that he doesn't move, and he didn't. He didn't move. He's all his assistant, and that's the only worrying thing. There'll be no it looked like there's no passion, but that's not the case. That's not the case at all. He celebrate, etc. But he's very. I think he does his work in the training ground, and he's all these big talker. He's very good at mic in hand. But I don't think, and he says it as well, like when we won the trophy, he just wanted to stay off the stage. He wasn't too keen in getting involved and all that, believe it or not. But he's very respectful. We were going to applaud all the fans after the game. He just isn't like a kind of big, like put yourself out there. But with the media, I get your concern. I used to hate it when we lost after the game, and he'd be what I'd call a bit arsey with the reporters. And they ask difficult questions, right? I think the media in this country are difficult, right? As someone who wants to get into the media, we have a difficult media that ask the wrong questions. They have a job to do, but they make it incredibly difficult for the manager. Ange is just typical Australian, he hasn't got too much patience in him, and he'll say it how it is. If you're looking at him the wrong way, or you ask him the wrong question, or you interrupt him, that's when you've got a problem. But his eyes would be glued to his shoes, is what I used to call it when we'd lost.
Yeah.
So there is a bit of that. If you ask him the day after, he's fine. He's and that's you'd argue, and I would argue that's passion. He hasn't got that professional side with him after a game to deal with it. And he'll just say the same thing over and over again. That's the only thing. He could be class at times. I think the media love him, though. I think that is clear, and that could play into your hands in some aspects. But I get your concerns. They're legitimate concerns, and I had them too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's fair that he got some of the criticism that he got, and Edward, who is Edward Wyervoz, he's clear in Australia. He says I would also be offended if someone called me a clown. Yep. Absolutely, fully agree with that. I think it was something that was unfair. I think sometimes he didn't help himself, and I want to just see him smile more. And it looks like he internalizes his passion rather than exudes it. And hopefully at Forest, we're going to see a smiling Ange, an Ange that has learned a few things from his time at Spurs in the Premier League. I think every manager looks to evolve. And I'm certain that, this is going to be an interesting journey. And I'm on board. I think Danscape, I'm hoping Danscape is as well at the moment. And at the end of the day, he's our manager and we have to kind of make the best of it. Harry, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on to Talking Reds. Thank you so much for your time. Harry is the founder of the Scarfe Spurs Talk podcast. So you can listen in to his channel where Harry's talking all things Spurs, of course, and other things. And Harry, I'd love it if you'd come back on to Talking Reds around the kind of fixture we've got coming up with Spurs, whenever that is in the future. We can have a chat about the game and get some opposition kind of insight from you at that point.
It'd be a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it. Grateful for this opportunity. And I'll lastly say, because I can tell that you two are completely sure about Ange. I didn't want him when he was first appointed. And I was like, why are we appointing? And it's nothing to do with his age, but someone who's clearly, had the majority of their managerial career. I wanted a more charismatic, kind of energetic, younger coach. I'd rather go down even like the Ryan Mason route. But very quickly, he's classing us with fans. And his results on the pitch change really quickly. I think he'll convince you. I want to come back to this even in, let's say, 6 weeks' time. And I think you'll be very, very happy. So I wish you all the best. And thank you very much for having me.
Well, cheers. I've already booked my flights to Istanbul on the back of your predictions for that cup final.
That's it. Yeah, we're there. Awesome. I'll let you out, Harry, and we'll stay in touch. All the best. Thanks, and take care. Cheers. Bye-bye. I can't believe he's 16. That's bonkers, isn't it? He's such a well-spoken guy for such a young age. And I just think, what an amazing guest to have on. He spoke so eloquently. And I know that, I wanted to kind of get some comments up from you guys in the chat, but, he was speaking so well and fluently. And I know that there are a few questions in there. I wanted to ask about the Gibbs-White situation, Wolfie, but, we were kind of wanted to make it more about Ange. And we'll get maybe his Gibbs-White view next time he comes on. But, yeah, Christian says as well in the comments, Harry is an excellent guest, and I fully concur with that. So, yeah, grateful for Harry giving up the time to come and have a chat with us about Ange. I know that some of the other pods have had Spurs guests on as well. So it was great for us to have him come on and share his insight. We'll just grab a quick breather.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Indeed, Stu Freestone is our sponsor, and you can get your goodies from him at his Cheese Trader shop in York. All right. Okay. Danscape. Ola Aina out injured 3 months. The news broke today. I was in the car, nearly crashed it. I was like, fuckity, fuck. And, everyone's then starting to sort of piece together, what does that mean for the squad? And then we found out that the squad had actually gone in. I think it was on Thursday. So what is that? That was yesterday. Today's Friday. Taiwo Awoniyi has been named in the 25-man squad. Ola Aina, because of his injury, won't feature in the squad. They can change it, of course, in January. Your initial reaction to the Ola Aina news, are we screwed in Europe, Danscape?
Well, hopefully there's a rule change that will help us out on that, and that's coming just in time, which maybe Palace fans will think is another conspiracy, if that is the case, to help us out. It's a big disappointment because we know how solid and reliable he is as a player. Aside from, I guess, the injury issues, and he has maybe struggled for a little while to show full fitness from what we saw early on last season. But yeah, it does bring back for me the concerns around those fullback positions, unfortunately, so early on. And maybe we thought we were going to get this at some point in the season, but to get it right from the outset is going to be a big test for the guys we brought in. So obviously it's a shame for tomorrow's game that Zinchenko's not even an option to kind of give us something else to try. So it looks like it probably is going to be Savona who's going to get the chance to impress, and ultimately there'll be a fair bit of pressure on him now to act quickly and get into this team quicker than perhaps he expected.
Okay, so just quickly going onto the Europa thing. For those of you that are still not quite sure how that works, we believe, and we're pretty sure now, that there is a rule that's come into play that states that if a player that's named in the Europa League squad picks up what is termed a long-term injury, he can be replaced by another player from your squad that hasn't been named, but only for an interim period. It takes you up to match day 6 without my diary in front of me. That's still a good amount of games. That's still quite far along. So we could replace him with Zinchenko. Then people will say, well, actually, can we replace him with Zinchenko? Because people were talking about the quota rule. So there is a 25-man squad, and I put a thread together earlier to try and explain it. And I'm going to quickly go through that now, because I think I made it pretty clear. I hope I did. The rules state that a club may have no more than 25 players on list day during the season. As a minimum, that's 8 places that are reserved exclusively for what is termed locally trained players. So, guys, that's a total of 8, just 8 players that have to be termed locally trained. The rules go on to state that locally trained players are then split into 2 different categories. You've got association trained players and club trained players. Now, a club may have no more than 4 association trained players in the 8. So you can't name more than 4 that are eligible. We happen to have more than 4. We have about 6 or 7 or 8, but you only have to name 4. Okay. It doesn't mean that if you have more than 4 association trained players in your squad that you can't use them. You can use them. Okay. So the 4 places within that 8 list that must be made up of club trained players, Ryan Yates is the only one that can take that place. So we know that 3 spaces weren't taken because we only had 1 club trained. So, for example, you could have a list of 8 that is something like Nico Williams, Anderson, Morgan Gibbs-White, and McAtee. They're your 4 association trained players, and Ryan Yates is your club trained player. And there's 3 blank spaces, which means that Aina doesn't have to be named as one of those association trained players. And therefore, he's just a regular squad member. So he can drop out and Zinchenko can come in to take his place under the new rule. So hopefully that was clearish. Forgive me if it's not. Go and read my thread on X. It's there, and maybe you can pick it apart and complain and slag me off a little bit if it's not good for you. But it looks like Zinchenko.
You've done more rule reading than Steve Parish managed, so you're already ahead of him.
I did. I got my eyeglasses out and I read, because it's quite small print. So I read that and it looks pretty clear cut to me. And I can't imagine that Zinchenko was left out for any other reason than footballing and choice. I don't believe there'll be an Arsenal clause. I think that's just fantasy. I don't believe that he's injured because he played for Ukraine. He's back in the building he's not back in the building. He's arrived into the building for the first time today. He looked very happy to be there. And I'm just waiting for the club, Dan, to give us some information on the Europa squad, because I think that's the big question now. Is it right that we can make the change? And are we correct? Am I correct that Zinchenko can take on Aina's place? I mean, that's pretty crucial, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think you're correct. I think the rules around the homegrown and squad grown players are fairly clear. And what's good is, we've got so many homegrown players in our team that we've been building up over the years, like you say, the names you've mentioned. So that side of it, we've got a good squad for. I guess we're just waiting for UEFA to actually implement this rule change about the injury switch over, because before it was only a goalkeeper that you could change. So the fact that they've only just decided that, I presume there might be a little bit of time before it becomes something that we can actually take the option on. But I also presume it'll happen before the first game, obviously, so that it applies throughout the first, like you say, half of the league games or whatever it is. So look, confident we'll get Zinchenko in, and that will be the straight swap that we just put him in for Aina now. And then if Aina's fit for the knockout stages, you can have that debate again about who's in and who's out.
Let's talk a bit more then about let's say the next 6 to 8 weeks, both in the Premier League and in Europe. And again, we don't know, because we know nothing about what Ange is going to do. Harry seems to think he's going to go straight in with his style, and we'll see that tomorrow at Arsenal, and that would be interesting if he does that. But in terms of personnel, do you think it's more likely then that Nico will switch to the right in the Premier League and we'll see Zinchenko operate down the left? As a first kind of thought, that looks on the face of it like the strongest option. I guess if it is Savona tomorrow and there's still doubts about his injury and whether he's fit or not, you know, he is a 6'4", 6'5" right back, which some people just don't think adds up. And he looks like his data tells us that he's more of a centre back. And maybe it's Jair Cunha that's more suited to playing as a right back. So maybe it would be Jair Cunha tomorrow. So, you know, we did that fullback episode that I touched on earlier last week where we highlighted all of our players that are going to play in these positions. If you haven't seen the fullback episode, it is good and worth going to watch, especially now that we know Ola's out. But under Ange, is the fullback area a crucial area? Do you know much about his style? Does he get his fullbacks flying down the wings?
Yeah, look, I think he does. I think they are a huge part of the game. I think they almost turn into number 10s, is what people describe them as. They come inside.
Done a lot of that at Arsenal and Man City, Robert.
Yeah,
he was like inverted, not into an invert midfield. He inverted into a 10.
Yeah, he can do that. He's got the skill on the ball to operate in those tight areas. So I think he can do it, and I think, like you say, he's the guy who is most likely to cement a place in the Premier League squad now that Aina's out. For tomorrow, look, it's just too early, isn't it? Like, it could be anything, and it could work or it could not. I don't think it's one we can judge for what will happen in the long run. It's just a needs must to get through that game. Could be Jair Cunha, could be Savona, could be Bakwa. I mean, that would be the exciting option. If we weren't going away to Arsenal, then I would say maybe we'll see like Bakwa doing a job in an attacking sense. But I think away at Arsenal, you've got to do something different. So look, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you want me to bring up the couple of charts now on fullback.
Yeah, if you've got them, let's
have a quick look. I suppose I started off on the defenders for Spurs and Forest, I guess, over time a little bit, just to see how much further up the pitch, because I know we've heard about defenders moving further up the pitch and having to do more work. And so on here, you've kind of got the going left to right average pitch position, which is where they touch the ball, right? So that's the average sort of point on the pitch from where a player will get in possession. And then bottom to top is where they make their tackles. And so you'll see that the biggest gap from Forest, which are kind of right down the bottom, notably, because we don't tend to press high for either the 23-24 season or last season. And Spurs, who are kind of towards the top right-hand side there with what are traditionally most of the sort of, bigger boy clubs, if you like, is that position where they actually engage the opposition as opposed to the position where they get on the ball. And I think this is the challenge that Forest will face. So there's a fair gap on that particular chart between Forest and Spurs. If we go forward a season to 24-25, the gap actually gets bigger. So these are Ange's 2 seasons, and the gap actually gets bigger because we've kind of gone into that position of dropping even deeper in terms of where we engage teams. But again, the actual, on the ball is not that much different. It's just that question mark about the intensity, basically, isn't it? That's the question: is can our defenders handle the fact that they've now got to step up and take on teams, whatever it is, 10 meters higher up the pitch, and that means doing more tackles and more intensity as opposed to what we've been used to. So again, just going through into 24-25 though, and you'll see Forest have now flipped from the very bottom of the chart to the very top of the chart. So we have actually been doing this already to some extent. Now whether or not that's caused Aina's injury, who knows? But we've already been making that step forward in terms of where we engage players from our defensive line to be, in the top 3 in the league this season so far. And we've reversed the trend on Spurs, who are now bang average from what they do. So they've clearly changed back in style from what they did under Ange. So yeah, a role reversal for us. And I suppose one final thing in terms of the team and what they do as a defence is just that Spurs don't really act, or didn't act under Ange, like a top 6 side, even though they finished there, because you would think in a top 6 side you don't have to do as much defending because you've got the ball. So you're down the bottom left of this chart in terms of how much defending you have to do and where you do it on the pitch. But actually, Spurs were more in the realm of where Everton and Luton and Forest are, because they actually they still did a lot of defending. So, it was, again, very, very front foot. And that's perhaps where their, struggles with injuries and struggles with intensity came from, is that they didn't just control the ball. They also went and engaged teams that bit higher up the pitch. And that's always going to be the question for any of our fullbacks now. And I think Nico Williams can do it. But the question is who can stand in and do it alongside him, I think.
Okay. So Ange Postecoglu is in the building. He is the first and only Australian to have ever managed in the Premier League when he took over at Spurs, and now he's back again. His press conference yesterday was a good 30 minutes listen. I encourage everyone, if you haven't yet, to go and listen to it, because he will start to win you over if you've got any doubts. And one thing I've noticed as well is that he seems to have his own fan club back in Australia. And I'm not saying that in any other way other than, it just looks like he has got his own fan club, which is great. We've seen an influx of Australians into the comments on Talking Reds, which I absolutely love. So if you are an Australian listening in to Talking Reds for the first time because you are an Ange Postecoglu fan, welcome aboard. We're thrilled that you might pay attention to us a little bit, and hopefully you'll get involved and let us know what you think. We'll try and be balanced where we can. One of our regulars on Talking Reds is Scott Terry, who runs the Nottingham Forest Australia supporters group on Facebook. They're having a meetup. I mentioned this the other day. Here it is again. They're meeting up all over in the major cities, and it's a 9:30 kickoff on Saturday, 13th, tomorrow. So all these meetups are taking place. So I encourage you, if you're in Australia and you're a Forest fan, to go and see if you can get involved in some of that. And Scott was also invited onto radio in Melbourne. And I'm going to play you that interview. It's just a few minutes long. It's worth listening to. And for all you Aussies out there that maybe haven't heard it, here is Scott on radio.
We spoke about Ange Postecoglu yesterday on the show with Josh Barnes and his new gig coaching Nottingham Forest. There's a small but mighty collection of Forest fans right here in Australia.
Scott Terry, Nottingham Forest fan, and he also runs the fans Facebook group here in Australia. Scott, good morning to you. Just before we have a bit of a chat, there's a bit of a musical theme in the show this morning, and Nottingham Forest, who Ange Postecoglu is about to take over as manager, they've got their own tune that we might play a bit of. That's gorgeous. So, Scott, welcome to the show, but also does Ange Postecoglu, how important is it that he learns the lyrics and the melody to the Mull of Kintyre?
Morning, Chanel. Morning, Bob. Mull of Kintyre. Yeah, look, that's our adopted song. We play it. It's played, just before we kick off in all the games. Obviously, we've gone and changed the words a little bit to suit ourselves. But now, it really gets the crowd going, and the fans love it. Just in terms of Ange, look, it's great to. It's exciting times to be a Forest fan, and I think Ange's record, all the trophies that he's won, he's got a proven track record in winning those trophies. So look, just really, just exciting, really. Very excited for Ange to start. He started. I think he held his first training session yesterday. There's some footage that have come out of that. So yeah, look, great to have Ange on board.
Scott, the club has been through a bit of turbulent times. 7 coaches in 7 years. Do you fear for Ange's future?
We do.
Well, it's funny you say that. I mean, he's obviously, Ange has a sort of a Greek background as well, and
yes.
And our owner, Evangelos Marinakis, is also a Greek guy, and we do wonder whether they've got similar sort of temperaments. I think they could be quite hot-headed, but I think there's already talk of them, a bit of a bromance going on there. Okay. So look, I think Ange and Evangelos could go well.
You're listening to Breakfast on 774 ABC Radio Melbourne with Charnel and Bob. We're chatting with Nottingham Forest superfan Scott Terry after Ange Postecoglu was given the job as manager. Scott, you are in the storm. You are in the middle of the hurricane of Nottingham Forest fans. What's been the reaction to the news that Ange Postecoglu is the man in charge now?
Look, it's been mixed. If I'm totally honest, it feels like it's a bit bittersweet, because our former manager Nuno, he was very well liked by Nottingham Forest fans. He had a real connection with the club, and I think whenever there's any change at any football club, there's always a little bit of I guess, concern as to how the new manager will get on. They've also got quite different styles. Ange typically plays a very attacking style of football. They usually sit quite high. They'll get the defence to sit on the halfway line, whereas Nuno had a more of a sort of structured game, and we would counter teams on the break. So very different styles. But I think you look, as I say, it's just really, really exciting times to be a Forest fan. I mean, Ange has gone and taken on one of the best squads that Forest have had in years. We've just gone and spent around about 160 million quid on players in this last sort of transfer window. So Ange is coming in at a great time. He's going to have a brilliant squad, a squad of depth. You know, we started the Premiership pretty well. We didn't have such a good game in our last game against West Ham, and we're also playing in the Europa League this season as well. Obviously, and Ange won the Europa League with Spurs last year, so lots of opportunity. Just really looking forward to seeing what Ange can do for Nottingham Forest.
Scott, before we let you go, when's their next game? When can we see Ange on the sidelines yelling?
Well, it's really interesting, really good question. Our next game, Forest play Arsenal, which is this Saturday. The timing is that the game will be on at 9:30 in the evening for Forest fans on the East Coast. I could just say as well, there is, because of the really good timing, there is going to be there's meetups for Forest fans all across Australia. There's going to be one in Melbourne as well. So if you're a Melbourne Forest fan or Melbourne-based Forest fan, get yourself down to the Hickins Hotel, which is on Russell Street. Plus, there's also meetups all around the major cities in Australia. All the details are on the Nottingham Forest Australia supporters group site. So please, everybody get down there. You know, look, it's a great time to be a Forest fan. We've now got an Australian manager. Look, it's just really good. And also with this, we do some really good debate and topics as well on the Talking Reds podcast. There's so much going on at the moment for Forest. It's just it's a great time to be a Forest fan.
Scott Terry, Nottingham Forest fan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Good luck on the weekend.
There you have it. That was Scott on radio in Australia, Melbourne radio. And I thought he spoke really well. It was great for him to get a nice little plug for Talking Reds in at the end. So we're really appreciative of that. So any Australians out there, if you're looking for a Premier League club to support, look no further. We've got one of your own now leading our club. And I'm full on board. That's it. I'm on the Ange trail. I am there right behind him. I've been told earlier on in the comments that Ange's beard is there to rival mine. I'm not quite sure about that. There it is. Nez13 says, Greg, you are being rivaled by Ange's beard. Well, I'm not sure. I'm going to grow it out a bit, Danscape. I thought I might go for a little bit of a longer look, because just to see how it looks. Christmas is coming. I want to get a few extra gigs. So yeah, thanks to Scott and to everyone for being in the comments with us this evening. Dan, anything you want to offer us before we go?
I guess it's just interesting hearing Harry's thoughts on Ange. I'm still on the fence with it. I think because I think it can go either way. You know, I think when you've got someone who's got such a clear style of play and potentially they don't deviate enough from it sometimes, then I think, it can go either way. You're relying on your players buying into it. You're relying on your injuries. Everything's got to go your way to play the way he does. So I'm on the fence, and I like, you know me, I like to weigh up both sides of it. It'd be interesting to see what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow could be a great one-off kind of, result that we need to kickstart the season, or it could be one that we don't really want to talk about. So let's see how it goes. But it's actually nice to have a game. That's the main thing. So we can stop talking and actually just, see what happens instead of wondering what will be.
The footballing gods are going to have their way. I said it the other day in the preview, and I feel something special coming. Last season, when we went away to Liverpool, we won at Anfield for the first time in donkey's years, and it absolutely sparked the season into life after, a tepid start. We've had another tepid start. I think it's only tepid because of the West Ham result. A great performance in the win against Brentford, a really good point on the road against Crystal Palace. It just came a little bit undone against West Ham. We want to try and get back on track. We hope that you might consider liking and subscribing, folks. please do hit the button. Follow us. We are back up and running on Apple. I managed to get the account unlocked. So all the podcasts are now up to date on Apple and Spotify. So you can follow us there. Listen on Spotify and Apple. We are on the cusp of being part of the sports podcast network as well. So that news will come hopefully quite soon. And we might be then reaching out and branching out and getting placed into other areas for podcasts as well. We're growing as much as we can. We need you guys on board. And so liking and subscribing really helps us do that. Thank you ever so much, Danscape. Harry was a great guest earlier. We're thankful to him as well. We'll be back to do the Arsenal review on Sunday night. News about who's coming on and what time that'll be on. We'll put out on social medias. In the meantime, let's get behind Forest tomorrow at Arsenal. 1-0 to the Forest. You heard it here first.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking